Hi, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Dave, and we're the IB English guys. And today we're going to kick off a 5-video series on the higher level essay from start to finish. We think you're going to like this, literature and language and literature students.
Yeah, that's great, Mr. Giles. We have some other videos on the channel that look at various aspects of the higher level essay, but we think this 5-video series from start to finish will really guide you to academic success.
Right. Now we need to remember that the higher level essay is asking students to pursue a line of inquiry about a literary or linguistic perspective.
Okay, a literary or linguistic perspective. I think I understand. Can you give me a couple examples, Mr. Giles?
Sure. We want to think about the idea of the author's choices. So if we're doing a paper on a literary text, we want to think about what is the author choosing to do? What are some different choices the author's making to convey an idea? So for example, we might want to think about an author's use of symbolism and focus our paper on the use of a symbol and how that progresses through the text. Or we could look at characterization, or perhaps we want to talk about setting.
Mr. Giles, that's great. Now, I'm thinking that's fantastic for our literature students, but what if some of our language students want to focus on a non-literary or linguistic element? What are some examples we could look at there?
Well, for example, if we're doing, let's say we're doing an opinion writer, we're doing an op-ed writer, maybe we talk about the use of sarcasm and humor to convey that certain topic. And I think, again, this is or perhaps the way authors are using certain anecdotes or allusions to history. So we're thinking like a writer or like a creator and thinking about craft. That's what they're talking about.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, Mr. Giles. Thanks for that clarification. Now, when I'm thinking about what texts we would choose, we have this massive menu of text. How do we know what to choose for our higher level essay?
Yeah, I think first we need to look at a table, look at some kind of list or chart of the text from our course, so we can really just holistically look at them and think about what are the different texts that we studied in this class that I can base my higher level essay on.
Okay, now here's a great example of a sample menu of text study. This links to our classes. Mr. Giles, as you look at this, what are some ones that jump at you? You know, Mr. Giles is going to be our student. We're going to look at his higher level essay that he's written, so we're going through his process. So how did you work this out?
I want to think about texts that resonated with me. So again, we could think about the different plays that were studied, because drama is always excellent to talk about. We could talk about some of the rich novels like The God of Small Things or Things They Carried. So again, we've got some rich literary text. Poetry makes great higher level essays that really, I think, as an examiner, that's another choice we have.
Sure, and perhaps if you wanted to gravitate more toward a non-literary text, maybe you want to look at some of the political cartoons that we looked at and part of that unit. Perhaps it's an episode or two or more from a series that you've watched with your class. Perhaps it's a series of speeches, so you have lots of options here.
Yeah, going back, we want to think about that. So what we've done is we've sort of brainstormed and we've chosen 2 texts that we want to work with. The first text that I'd like to work with is a play from South Africa, and this play is called Sizwe Banzi is Dead. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's a provocative play about the struggle for identity and survival of Black South Africans. It was co-written by Atul Fugard with 2 other Black actors, John Connie and Winston Deshona, and I think it is a really powerful play with a lot of interesting features and dramatic craft that I want to talk about.
Yeah, for me, if I were choosing, I tend to gravitate more toward the non-literary Mr. Giles. I really like that Apple Inventors Campaign from 1980. This is where we saw some of the founding fathers of the United States, and they were sort of juxtaposed with these ideas of innovation, and it was a time where technology was on the rise, and I think Apple really cleverly leveraged those founding fathers, and I think I'm interested in that.
I like that, and I think those were like early Apple ads, and I like the idea of a vintage ad. We're not just like stuck in the 2022 realm. I think that's clever. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to take these texts and we want to brainstorm. We want to really start to just think about the ideas that are in this text. So when I think about Sizwe Banzi is Dead, and I'm brainstorming, I'm thinking about ideas of identity, I'm thinking about survival. I'm obviously the fight with bureaucracy and paperwork that is represented in the play. Ideas of family or dreams and aspirations, and of course the oppressive systemic racism in the play. These are the rich ideas in
Mr. Giles, that's impressive. You know, when I think about the Apple Inventors Campaign, of course I think about revolution. You know, they've really played with this idea of the Revolutionary War of the United States, and they've sort of juxtaposed that with this technology revolution. I like the idea of innovation and hard work. I think those are some value messages and thematic ideas that are embedded in the campaign. Perhaps this idea of simplicity, that if you take on this Apple computer, you can simplify your life and make your jobs easier. Individuality, independence, wisdom, and Mr. Giles, there's so many ideas we could play with. I think
Love it.
Yeah, there's a lot to do here. But that's not the only thing we have to do, Mr. Giles.
That's right, because now we have to think about our linguistic or literary aspects. So now we're thinking about what are the different techniques and features and choices that the author made. Well, Sizwe Banzi is Dead is a very modern, avant-garde type of theater. So we want to think about breaking the fourth wall. There's a monologue to talk about. There's improvisation, non-linear aspects. So lots of really interesting literary features or literary aspects that we could pursue.
Similarly, if I want to think about the non-literary aspects, the linguistic features rather of the Apple campaign, I want to think about the symbolism, Mr. Giles. There's such rich symbolism in those advertisements. Maybe I want to think about anachronism, how they've taken these political people from another time period and transported them to that time. That might be my area of focus. Maybe I want to think about the synthetic personalization and the use of you and how they challenge the reader and confront the reader to purchase the product. There's a lot of things we can do there.
You just dropped a big word, anachronism. I like that.
I try. I have my moments, Giles.
So we want to remember there's two pillars to the line of inquiry. We want to think about that linguistic, literary aspect, but we also want to think about an argument or a rich idea. If we have those two things, we've got the gold for a good line of inquiry.
Yeah, Mr. Giles, we've done some really good thinking now, and this is your project. This is your higher level essay. So what do you want to choose? And this is what we're ultimately going to be working with for our next 5 videos.
Well, I'm gonna stick with Sizwe Banzi is Dead. It's a play I really enjoy. It's a play I can write about, and it's a play that I would like to investigate. So we want to remember when we're writing a line of inquiry, we want to think about some different components. We have a previous video that talked about composing your line of inquiry. We want to think about, first of all, asking a question. We want to include the author and the text and the genre. We want to think about it being drama or novel or short story. And we want to connect to those two pillars, the linguistic or literary aspect and the rich idea.
Yeah, of course, folks, this isn't a prescriptive formula that the IB has given. This is Mr. Giles and Mr. Cohen, through years of experience in looking at these, we feel that this is the strongest way to do this work.
That's right. So we're going to give you just a couple examples. Sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say, remember, these are lines of inquiry. Mr. Giles and I, when we formulate these questions, we don't necessarily have the answers yet. We know that we're inquiring. We're going to have to do additional research. So don't think that we can just answer these off the bat. This requires some more thinking and more investigation.
That's right. We're asking the question, then we go inquire.
Giles, since you're interested in Sizwe Banzi is Dead, why don't you take the first sample and see if we like it?
Okay. How does Atul Fugard utilize the conventions of avant-garde theater in his drama Sizwe Banzi is Dead to convey the struggle for identity for Black South Africans during apartheid?
Mr. Giles, I think that's a very impressive line of inquiry. Of course, you have all the 7 elements. That's that struggle for identity, which, as my friend, I know that's what you're interested in the play. I think that's a really good question, and I think that has potential and possibility for you.
Yeah, I think, again, we're considering that linguistic aspect, and we're connecting to an idea.
You might want to take out struggle for identity and pop in other ideas like racism or equality and just see which one resonates with you in the end and then make some choices there.
That's right. But we are connected to a rich idea, and I like that. What about Apple? Let's hear your Apple line of inquiry, my friend.
All right. How does Apple use anachronistic images and allusions to American historical figures in their 1980 Inventors print advertising campaign to convey a value message of revolution or innovation?
Okay. I like it. I love that. I love the anachronistic images, and I think that's in direct connection to the allusion to the figures. They kind of go together, but I like both of those. I think they fit.
I think eventually, Mr. Giles, I may make a choice between revolution or innovation. I don't want to take on too much, and I want to be narrow enough, so that's kind of my preliminary question. And through my inquiry, I will probably commit to one of those 2 ideas.
That's great. So you can look at the handout below. We've written a couple other lines of inquiry and other samples. The idea is to write several. We want to work with several. We want to work with some different ways of expressing this, get some feedback from friends, from teachers, and think about which one's the best one we want to choose. So how do we choose a line of inquiry?
Well, before we get, Mr. Giles, I want to say, don't be frustrated. These things don't just roll off your tongue. This takes some wordsmithing. This takes some deep thinking. So, you got to stay with it for a while so these roll out. But to answer your question, what do we need to keep in mind when we're doing this? Mr. Giles, I think the line of inquiry has to have access to complexity and depth. We can't do any type of superficial investigation. Whatever our rich idea is truly must be a rich idea that we can develop some very strong body paragraphs for.
Yeah, and we want to also make sure the line of inquiry invites us to talk about rich features and provide rich analysis of that linguistic aspect. This is a pitfall. A lot of students choose a line of inquiry that doesn't have a literary aspect. that's going to really fall flat because you're not going to really be analyzing craft.
What's the next thing, Mr. Giles? We have a couple more.
Yeah, so I think, like, again, relevant to the text purpose, that our rich idea is really central to the text. I think innovation and revolution is so central to that ad you pick.
Sure, if you're choosing another topic, you're really missing the main claim, the main focus of Apple's intent, and you're off on a tangential idea. That's not where you want to be.
Yeah, and lastly,
folks, you need to choose something that you have deep interest and passion for. You're going to be working with this topic for quite some time. I think it's a flawed idea to think about what's going to impress an examiner. No, I think you need to think about, what do you truly want to explore? What are your interests? What are your passions? And learn something and enjoy the process.
Yeah, and then you crush out, you start to work on brainstorming and outlining, which is our next video. That's the second video or series. We hope that you enjoyed this. There's a graphic organizer attached to the video below. Have a look at that. Get some experiment with your own lines of inquiry and really think about what can produce a great paper.
Yeah, folks, we hope this video is helpful for you. Again, use the organizers we provided. Go through the same process that Mr. Giles and I have gone through. Come back for video 2, and we will take you to the end of the higher level essay. Thanks for joining, and see you next time.
Thanks, guys.